Welcome to Scary Ghost Stories. Today, we're exploring the dark history and haunting tales of one of England's most infamous palaces, Hampton Court Palace. And this palace has been stirring up royal drama since the early 16th century. Hampton Court Palace. Located in the London borough of Richmond-upon-Thames in southwest London, England, this palace has been the centre of all the royal juiciness since its construction in 1514. It was originally built for Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, the chief advisor to King Henry VIII, and let me tell you, this guy was living the life. He had it all: power, money, and a palace that could make the Kardashians jealous. But, little did he know, all good things must come to an end. In 1529, after falling out of favour with King Henry VIII, the palace was seized by the king and became a royal palace. And King Henry VIII was the king of making things happen. He transformed the palace into a grand palace fit for a king, and it's been a royal hotspot ever since. When the Tudors had the place, they weren't content with just living in a palace, they had to make it grand, so they gave it some renovations and expansions, adding the Great Hall, the Chapel Royal, and the King's apartments. But the real magic happened when King William III and Queen Mary II got their hands on it in the late 17th century. They turned it into a Baroque masterpiece that still takes our breath away. Fast forward to the 19th century, and the palace became a hot tourist destination. People came from near and far to marvel at its magnificent architecture, rich history, and to hear the ghost stories and legends that surround this old palace. And today, it continues to attract millions of visitors each year. And it is now managed by the Historic Royal Palaces, a charity that's in charge of some of the most iconic palaces in the United Kingdom, including the Tower of London, Kensington Palace, and the Banqueting House in Whitehall. Hampton Court Palace, it is said to be haunted by many ghosts. One of these ghosts is believed to be Catherine Howard, who was the fifth wife of King Henry VIII. Catherine Howard was born in 1521 and was a member of the Howard family, one of the most powerful families in England at the time. She became a lady-in-waiting to King Henry VIII's fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, and soon caught the king's eye. They were married in 1540, but the marriage was short-lived. Catherine was accused of having affairs with several men before she married the king, and it was also rumoured that she had an ongoing affair with a former love interest after she became queen. These allegations eventually led to her downfall, and she was executed for treason in 1542. It is said that the ghost of Catherine Howard roams the halls of Hampton Court Palace, where she lived as queen. Some people claim to have seen her ghostly figure running down the gallery, calling out for help. Others have reported hearing the sound of her footsteps and her desperate cries. Eyewitness accounts of people claiming to have seen the ghost of Catherine Howard vary, but some of the most common include the sight of a ghostly figure running down the gallery, calling out for help. Others have reported hearing the sound of her footsteps and her desperate cries. Some people claim to have seen her ghostly figure near the stairs leading up to her former quarters, and she is also known as the Grey Lady. A visitor who was exploring the palace in the early evening said, as they entered the room where Catherine was said to have been held before her execution, they suddenly heard a ghostly wail. The visitor reported feeling a strong sense of fear and coldness, as if the ghost was warning them of something. As they turned to leave the room, they saw the ghostly figure of Catherine Howard, standing by the window. The visitor reported that Catherine's ghost was wearing a white gown and appeared to be staring out of the window, as if she was watching something in the distance. The visitor felt a strong sense of sadness and despair coming from the ghost, as if Catherine was still mourning her fate. It is said that Catherine Howard's ghost is one of the most haunted at Hampton Court Palace, and her tragic story continues to captivate the imagination of many people. The ghost of King Henry VIII is said to haunt the grounds of Hampton Court Palace, particularly in the area near the Royal Tennis Court. According to legend, the ghost of King Henry VIII has been seen wandering the palace grounds, dressed in his royal robes and carrying a hunting falcon like a boss. Eyewitness accounts of people claiming to have seen the ghost of King Henry VIII vary, but some of the most common include the sight of a ghostly figure near the Royal Tennis Court, where the king was known to enjoy playing. Others have reported hearing the sound of his footsteps and the rustling of his royal robes. Some people claim to have seen his ghostly figure near the gardens and fountains, as if he is still admiring the beauty of his former residence, living his best afterlife. A visitor to the palace was touring the grounds late one afternoon, admiring the beautiful architecture and rich history of the place. As they walked through the grounds, they suddenly had the feeling that they were being watched. They turned around, but saw no one there. However, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. As they continued their tour, they noticed a figure in the distance, dressed in period clothing. At first, they thought it was a costumed interpreter, but as they got closer, they realized that the figure was translucent and had a ghostly quality to it. The visitor felt a chill run down their spine as they realized they were looking at the ghost of King Henry VIII. The ghostly figure appeared to be wandering near the royal tennis court, as if it was searching for something. The visitor was both frightened and fascinated by the experience, and they watched in awe as the ghostly figure slowly disappeared, fading into nothing. The visitor left the palace with a sense of awe and wonder. They knew that they had experienced something truly special and unique, and they would never forget their encounter with the ghost of King Henry VIII. Another popular account of someone encountering the ghost of King Henry VIII at Hampton Court Palace involves a group of visitors who were exploring the palace, said, as they approached the royal tennis court, they suddenly heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. The footsteps grew louder and louder until the group saw the ghostly figure of a man in regal attire, who they believed to be King Henry VIII himself. The figure was said to be carrying a large staff and was pacing back and forth, as if deep in thought. The visitors reported feeling a strong sense of authority and power coming from the ghost, as if King Henry was still in charge of the palace. Suddenly, the ghost turned towards the visitors and stared at them with piercing eyes. The visitors reported feeling a chill run down their spines and a sense of fear, as if they were being judged by the former king. After a few moments, the ghost turned away and disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Now on to the ghost of Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour was the third wife of King Henry VIII, and she died shortly after giving birth to his son, Edward VI. It is said that her ghost haunts the palace, particularly in the area near the Chapel Royal. There have been many stories over the years of people encountering the ghost of Jane Seymour at Hampton Court Palace. One of the most common accounts involves visitors feeling a strong presence near the Chapel Royal, where Jane is said to haunt. Some people claim to have seen the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in period clothing, wandering the halls and silently staring at them. Others have reported feeling a sudden drop in temperature or a sense of sadness in the area, as if they are being watched by a ghostly presence. One particularly intriguing account involves a group of visitors who claimed to have seen the ghost of Jane Seymour in the Chapel Royal. They reported that she appeared to be searching for something, and her ghostly form was glowing with an ethereal light. As they watched, the ghostly figure suddenly disappeared, leaving the visitors feeling both frightened and amazed. Next up we have the ghost of Sybil Penn. Sybil Penn was a nurse to Prince Edward, the son of King Henry VIII and Queen Jane Seymour. She died at Hampton Court Palace, and it is said that her ghost still haunts the palace, particularly in the area near the nursery. There are many stories about the ghost of Sybil Penn, the nurse to Prince Edward, haunting Hampton Court Palace. Visitors to the palace have reported strange and eerie experiences in the area near the nursery, where Sybil is said to haunt. One such account is of a visitor who was touring the palace late at night. As they approached the nursery, they suddenly felt a strong and overwhelming sense of sadness. Despite being alone, they felt as though they were being watched by an unseen presence. Suddenly, they saw the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in period clothing, hovering in the air near the nursery. The visitor was struck by the ghost's piercing gaze and the sadness that seemed to radiate from her. Another visitor to the palace reported hearing strange noises coming from the nursery. Upon investigation, they saw the ghostly figure of Sybil Penn, slowly rocking back and forth in a chair, as if she was soothing a baby. The visitor reported feeling a strong sense of peace and calm, as if Sybil was watching over them and protecting them from harm. Next up, the maid. There have been many stories over the years of people encountering the ghost of a maid at Hampton Court Palace. The most common accounts involve visitors seeing the ghostly figure of a young woman carrying a candle, wandering the halls near the clock court. One such account is of a visitor who was touring the palace late at night. As they approached the clock court, they suddenly heard the sound of footsteps echoing down the hall. They turned to see the ghostly figure of a young woman, carrying a candle and walking towards them. The visitor reported feeling a strong sense of fear, as if the ghost was warning them of something. Another visitor to the palace claimed to have seen the ghost of the maid in the clock court, standing in front of a large grandfather clock. The visitor reported that the ghostly figure was staring at the clock, as if she was counting the seconds until some unknown event. The visitor reported feeling a strong sense of unease and quickly left the area, feeling as if they were being watched by the ghostly figure. Now on to the two screaming ghosts that haunt this palace. Firstly, we have the Screaming Guard is one of the most well-known ghostly figures said to haunt Hampton Court Palace. According to legend, he was a former guard of the palace who was driven to madness by the ghosts he encountered on the job. Some say that he died on the grounds after being driven insane by the supernatural, while others believe that he was murdered and his ghost still haunts the palace in search of justice. Eyewitness accounts of the Screaming Guard vary, but many visitors to the palace have reported hearing his ghostly screams echoing through the halls. Some say that they have seen his ghostly figure roaming the grounds, while others have reported feeling a strange, eerie presence in certain parts of the palace. The Screaming Lady was once a servant or member of the royal court who was wronged in some way. Some say she was betrayed by someone close to her, while others believe she was the victim of a terrible injustice. Whatever the case may be, her spirit is said to still haunt the halls of the palace, seeking justice for the wrongs that were done to her. Visitors to the palace have reported hearing the sound of her ghostly screams echoing through the halls, sending shivers down their spines. Some say they've even seen her ghostly figure roaming the grounds, her ghostly robes billowing in the wind. But beware, those who dare to venture into the parts of the palace where she is said to haunt, they may feel a strange, eerie presence that is sure to send a chill down their spine. So, if you're brave enough to visit Hampton Court Palace, keep an ear out for the Screaming Lady's haunting cries. And who knows, you may just have a close encounter with this vengeful ghost. One such account comes from a tourist who visited the palace on a quiet, autumn evening. According to the tourist, they were exploring the palace when they suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream coming from one of the nearby halls. Fearing for their safety, the tourist cautiously approached the source of the scream, only to find that the halls were empty. However, as they continued to walk, they noticed a ghostly figure in the distance, wearing flowing robes and with hair as white as snow. The figure appeared to be staring directly at the tourist, before suddenly disappearing into thin air. The tourist was left shaken by the encounter and claimed that the Screaming Lady's ghostly figure was unlike anything they had ever seen before. They reported feeling a strong sense of unease and terror, as if the ghostly figure was trying to communicate with them. If you would like to visit Hampton Court Palace for yourself, you can do so by booking in via their booking site, which I will link in the description of this video. The price of tickets may vary, but usually cost between £26 and £28 per adult and between £13 and £14 per child. Under 5's admission is free. So why not book in today, for your chance to spot one of the palace's many ghosts. Take care, and thank you for watching Scary Ghost Stories.